get an experience of the wisdom of the collective. And so but that raises a bunch of questions. And one of the biggest questions for me is how to begin to elicit or foster or nurture a good dialogue between the self that appears to be an individual. And again, that's only an appearance, right? There are like trillions of cells here, right? And intriguingly, there's the same number of same scale, same order of magnitude of atoms in any one cell, right? So the idea that somehow this is an individual is in many ways a bit of an illusion. But still, there's this relationship between the collective and the individual, and how we nurture or foster. And one of the things that I'm really hoping to do, I mean, we have a lot to talk about, right? And there are a lot of technical details to talk about. We have a lot to talk about in terms of validators and their relationship to the co-op. We have, Vlad will frame a lot of these kinds of questions. But I also want to challenge you that maybe there are some other technologies besides the kinds of technologies that push bits around that will help us get to an access of this higher collective. Yes, Christian. Got it. Cool. All right. Thank you. Thank you. That's that's good. This question of beginning to create this relationship between the individual self and the collective self, and to foster a genuine dialogue between the two. I think that there are some technologies that we need to tap into that have been developed over many centuries, but are also currently developing. And so I want to challenge you with some of those kinds of technologies as well. Just as a taste. This is such a funny picture, isn't it? I'm sorry to interrupt the flow of the narrative, but it's so interesting. You know, like the dollar bill, at least for many Americans, is kind of burned into our subconscious. But it's an interesting message, right? Out of many, one, right? Out of many, one. E pluribus unum, right? And that message that's actually on our currency has a lot of currency to what we're talking about here at the Governance Forum, which is what's the technologies that allow us to build this one out of many, right? And obviously currency is one kind of organizing technology, and government is another kind of organizing technology. Sometimes social media can work in this way, and sometimes it can be remarkably polarizing and divisive. But there are these other technologies that I think that I hope to tap into. Mukara is going to be talking to us about cultivating group genius. And she brings a lot of her work it's rooted in a tradition that goes back centuries. Likewise, on Saturday, we'll be introducing you to circular and orchestral techniques for self-organization. Now, largely these have been employed within the context of the Guitar Circle, which is a community that grew up since 1987 around the world. But they're just as applicable to lots of organizations and lots of kinds of activities as they are to music. And so I really want to encourage all of you, get in, get hands-on, try these things out. Tai Chi is another one of these technologies that allows us to tap into a flow that makes it possible to relate the flow here to the flow here. And to accelerate that. the reason I keep emphasizing this is not just because we have a task in front of us that's mammoth. I mean, the undertaking of RChain, even if we didn't consider its context, is mammoth. It's huge, right? We have all this technical innovation, and we also have all this social and fiscal innovation that's going on. But the context in which this is happening is just as important. So I just would tell a very, very brief story. Back at the beginning of January, and this explains why there's a picture of a guitar case here. so back at the beginning of January, I was going down to Costa Rica to play a gig. I was supposed to be on a Tai Chi retreat, and I was supposed to, at the retreat, play a gig. And so dutifully, I took my guitar along with other musical instrumentation, and I specifically asked the Delta representative, if I check this at the gate, will it go all the way through? And they assured me that it would. It never showed up in Costa Rica, and for the entire retreat, I spent nearly a full work week. I spent over 35 hours on the phone trying to talk to a Delta representative that knew something accurate and true about my guitar. And to a person, not a single person had an accurate view of the disposition of my guitar. And I also spoke with over 35 representatives of Delta as an organization. And of the 35 representatives, only 2 understood what it meant to take personal responsibility for something. Only 2, there was one of them who said, she said, here's my number, call me back in the morning after I've done some digging. So there was exactly 1 out of 35. And when I called her back, she said, you know, I lay awake all night thinking about your guitar. I want to make sure that we can help you find it. Ultimately, she was not able to. And that was largely because within the organization, they didn't even understand many, many things. And so just a very brief example, if you go to the Delta website and you type in my case number, you'll see that the guitar makes it from Seattle to LA and then magically appears in Atlanta and goes to Mexico City. And so there were many Delta representatives who were trying to reach Mexico City. But it turns out that other Delta representatives informed me that they recycle the tag numbers after 3 days. So Delta really, really is this distributed and in many ways decentralized organization, and no one has a view of the truth. Now, that kind of organization is not going to get us where we need to go. And where we need to go is really stark. If you look at the climate change data, it is alarming. It's astonishing. When you have mainstream public figure scientists like Neil deGrasse Tyson saying on CNN, we don't have the technology to move our coastal cities inland by 20 miles in the next few years. We need to wake up, right? We need to wake up. And to move with that kind of speed, we cannot use the existing governance mechanisms and coordination mechanisms. It won't work. They're moving too slow. So we have to move with a different kind of grace and a different kind of speed and a different kind of compassion, right? A different way in which we can, like that Delta representative, put ourselves in another person's shoes, right? And so some of the technologies that will be presented here are about tapping into that flow so that we RChain as an organization can move with the kind of grace and speed that's necessary to begin to address the changes that are coming. So I just want to close with just a few questions and then hand it over to Vlad. So I guess what I'm asking here at the Governance Forum, I'm asking all of you individually, and I'm asking RChain as a collective, is what kind of self is RChain? So one way of figuring that out, I'm always interested in what people do with their success. Like, what happens if you get what you wish for? Like, have you thought far enough to consider the repercussions, right? I mean, I remember when the first time it dawned on me, the relationship between the conditions of Mexico City, where the lead from exhaust is so intense that it's lowering the average IQ by 7 points. When I made the connection between that and the inventor of the combustion engine, right? Like, did the inventor of the combustion engine envision Mexico City, right? So are we able to handle getting what we wish for? I mean, it's also, you know, I mean, there's a positive side to this, but and in some ways that's related to, you know, can we be regularly astonished? Like, I remember how when I first held my daughter, my youngest daughter, in my hands, and just being astonished at her hands, at what a miracle these little fingers were, and I feel that way again and again when I look at the life around me, but especially when I look at the work that RChain has been able to accomplish. It's nothing less than astounding, and we need to keep remembering how astonishing it is. It's a part of that in-breath that is a certain kind of refreshment. And in connection with that, there's another question that has to do with being able to remember where we've come from, right? Part of being astonished is remembering how far we've come, which is a part of remembering where we've come from and where we're going. The year my daughter was born, or within about the year my daughter was born, my grandmother passed away. My mother's mother passed away. And the penny dropped for me about the organization of our culture. Like, how often, like my daughter was born at home. In fact, all of my children were born at home. I even, when my first son was born, the midwife turned to me, the same midwife who helped deliver my daughter, she turned to me and said, "Will you deliver him?" She hadn't prepared me for this. And of course, there's only one answer: yes. And of course, she guided me through all of it. I did almost nothing. But the main thing that was present for me was being present at the beginning, being present at birth, being present at the inception. Right? Are we present to the inception of RChain? But the other one was, and I felt a lot of remorse. I wasn't able to make it to the moment when my grandmother passed away. But that was sort of why the penny dropped. In this culture, we're sort of isolated from the birth process, and we're isolated from the death process. It's sort of papered over, it's behind a curtain. But that means that for many, many people living in this country and in other countries, they have no idea where they came from, and they have no idea where they're going. And that has a huge impact on your experience of human life. Right? And that's kind of what I want us to understand here. Like, you know, is RChain the kind of self that can remember where it came from and remember where it's going? And then as a part of that, remembering that at the end of the day, we have to surrender to the process. I mean, in some sense, that's the whole point of decentralization. No one is in charge. No one's in control. You know, keep calm. No one's in control. No one's in charge. And for me, this is the beginning of what it is to be able to actually play, to surrender to the impulse of being able to play. So is this an organization, you know, that can play? And that play is, I think it is. My experience is that this is one of the most magically creative communities I have ever seen. The amount of innovation that happens on a daily basis, let alone you know, a monthly basis, is just staggering. And I also have a confession to make, which was that I was a little bit too timid to write another four-letter word, and that other four-letter word was love. Is RChain, as an organization, the kind of self that can love? And it was kind of interesting because you know, I was thinking about making this confession right before I came to this talk, and you know, Makara asked me to have this mystery message, you know, pull out one of these mysteries, and I open it up and it says, you know, love is an act of precision, or an act of precision. Thank you. Of course, I'm going to get it backwards. Precision is an act of love. And you know, it felt so appropriate for someone who is a mathematician as well as a musician. That in some ways, you know, part of what this is all about is being precise enough that we can love. So, with that, I'm going to turn this over to Vlad, and we can have this forum framed.
Thanks a lot, Greg. Super nice. I'm going to set up my laptop over here, stand awkwardly beside it. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the first ever RChain Governance Forum. I'm glad you made it, and I'm excited to be here. It's going to be a lot of fun, and hopefully also very productive. So, like, why kind of are we here? No, I don't have slides. Otherwise, I would absolutely want them to show up. Kind of, you know, why are we here, right? Well, so firstly, I would say we're here to like learn about each other, to get to know each other, and to be in the same space to kind of experience the RChain community and be immersed in what might be the RChain culture, whatever it is that ties us together. I'm not sure what exactly it is, but we're going to find out, hopefully, right? And we're going to also learn about the different resources that we share in common, right? The things that will affect all of us, things like the software repositories, things like what software runs on nodes, stuff like the RChain co-op and what it means to be a member and how the treasury is spent, all sorts of stuff that I'm sure you want to talk about, and more stuff than we'll be able to really get a total handle on. So we're going to look at these resources, and then we're going to try to understand our relationship to them. How do we coordinate to govern them? How do we coordinate around them? And, you know, especially given that some of us are going to be a lot more able to participate than others. Some people are going to be affected, but not that able to influence the process, whereas like some people are going to be participating on a more day-to-day basis. And the relationship between different types of community members is going to, you know, really affect the blockchain, the whole blockchain community of RChain. So somehow, I want to say that, like, okay, we have shared resources, and the way we govern them matters. It's going to affect, you know, how we upgrade the software, how we go through the technical development. It's going to affect how we recover from failure, how we deal with crisis. It's going to, you know, it kind of determines the relationship between the community and the blockchain, right? Because the blockchain is a shared, replicated state, right? It's very much a shared resource. It's not something that you can really governed by yourself. It's something that has to be that is governed through this collective coordination process. And we need to decide collectively somehow what is our relationship with the blockchain. And the other thing is that we need to understand the purpose of why we're here and how that relates to the governance resources, right? Like, if we're all united by a common vision or a common purpose, then we should try to relate the governance of our resources to make sure that we kind of get our goals, right? So, but whether or not we talk about governance, whether or not we actually deal with and learn about these things in a public manner, governance will happen. Governance exists whether or not you pay attention to, and especially in crisis, governance will be formed when there's demand. So the more we learn about it, the more we think things ahead, the more we're going to have a governance process that we're happy with and that we kind of chose, as opposed to one that was imposed or which we kind of came across accidentally through ad hoc decisions that no one really was privy to. So then there's lots of case studies actually in the blockchain space about this type of thing, right? In Bitcoin, there's the big block debate about whether the block should be bigger or smaller. There was the DAO hard fork in Ethereum. There's right now in Ethereum we're having this discussion about the Ethereum improvement proposal process and how it relates to the devs call and whether irregular state transitions should be allowed in the Ethereum improvement proposals. And it's a really kind of all these questions about whether the block size should be bigger, whether the DAO should be bailed out, whether there should be regular state transitions, are stuff that became huge issues because there was no common understanding and agreement about what to do with these things initially. We didn't have something that we agreed and that we all knew that we would all use to coordinate around these decisions, and so it led to a kind of identity crisis in each of these cases, and in some cases it's still ongoing. And this actually leads like the next kind of topic, which is the concept of legitimacy, right? I kind of gave it a little bit. Like a governance process is said to be legitimate if people agree and like know that they all kind of consent to coordinate around it and to use it, as opposed to replace it or to abandon it. A legitimate governance system is one that everyone kind of has common knowledge that we consent to using. It's harder to coordinate to replace a legitimate governance process. It's much easier to respect a legitimate governance process, and because you expect other people will use it. So somehow, I think legitimacy is super important for governance of all of the resources that we have, because because legitimacy protects the governance process, right? It prevents it from being replaced. It prevents it from being abandoned, and that means that when things are when there's crisis, when there's external pressure, when there's adversaries, our governance processes can be defended, and our collective will can be preserved through basically our agreement to use processes to govern our shared resources. So, what we're going to do in this conference is we're going to break out into working groups devoted to different resources that affect members of the RChain community. And we're going to do our best to learn about, like, what are those resources, like, what are the decisions that could be made for them, who's affected by them, who's going to participate, what are they going to know, what are their incentives, like, and specifically we're going to try to look at what might be some best practices and what might be the basis of the legitimacy of the governance of all of these different resources. And so, I'm really excited about this because, like, the working groups, the stuff produced in the working groups could form a knowledge base that will help us think about how we coordinate around our resources in the future. And I think it's really important that we engage in a kind of public choice here, because many, many different stakeholders that don't even exist today are going to be affected by the way that we govern these resources and by the precedents we set. So it's really important that we try to see outside of ourselves and outside of our immediate incentives, to look at all of the stakeholders that might one day be affected by the decisions that we make and by the resources that we're governing. Because if we don't, then we're much more likely to end up in a situation where we have governance processes that have a crisis of legitimacy, that that don't represent the stakeholders of the community, that people feel disenfranchised by. And so it's super important that we are considerate of the interests of people who are not here when we're talking about the governance of these resources. Because all of this stuff will have long-term consequences. And if you're not able to see beyond your own incentives, at least look long distance, right? Look at your long-term incentive as opposed to your short-term incentives. Because those are kind of more enlightened, generally speaking, than your short-term incentives. So basically, I think we're fundamentally kind of here to build shared understanding of what are our shared resources, who we are, what are we here for, what are our shared resources, how do we coordinate around governing them in a way that represents the interests of stakeholders into the future, and that is something that we can actually agree to continue to use. And something also that people who aren't participating in can believe that they will be represented, right? So it's the judge of the legitimacy of a governance process really should be the extent to which people who don't participate are happy to go along with the process. So with that, basically, I hope we kind of are ready to focus and build like knowledge bases that will serve us into the future, and also to like not forget to have fun, even though what we're doing is super important. Just thanks everyone. Hey Makar, welcome. Thanks for coming.
So Greg and Vlad, would you please come into the center? Out there? Yeah, that center. Stand facing each other, please. And decide who's going to be the apple and who's going to be the banana. It's not a big decision, guys. Okay. Okay, so Apple, would you please tell Greg, what is the most significant thing that you've learned from him, either today or historically? Very short, very concise. Okay. Okay.
So the answer to types as formulas is this great interpretation of types as formulas. Which means that you give a description and then any term that satisfies it is kind of satisfied by that type.
Okay.
So basically, computer science more broadly, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Whatever you say is right.
Sure feels
Okay.
like it.
Yeah. And so Greg, you just say thank you.
Thank you.
And Greg, what have you learned from Vlad that's been really impactful for you?
Wow, I've learned a lot. Actually, I think of Vlad as one of these earthly angels. So there are a bunch of folks like Vlad and Vitalik and others, but Vlad in particular, who I remember myself at that age, and I was nowhere near as together, and I was overwhelmed by ennui when I looked at the I looked at the state of the world and was like, oh no, I can't do anything. But Vlad, in my experience of you, is that you're not overwhelmed by ennui. You're kind of rolling up your sleeves and getting done what you can get done, and that's just remarkable. It's amazing.
Thank you for sharing, for knowing and sharing how you have affected each other. And please clap. Okay,
All right.
back to you to introduce me.
Oh, okay. I think you've already introduced yourself here. So, as everyone probably knows, Makara is my mother, and largely what I experience her as doing is taking a lifelong or a very deep-seated Buddhist practice, and and taking the techniques that she's developed from there and clothing them in ways to help Fortune 100 companies and other kinds of high impact groups begin to cultivate group genius, begin to tap into a higher self, begin to be able to participate in something larger than themselves. How's that?
I don't know. Let's see if there's anything else you should say. You could tell the people that I'm so excited to be here and that I feel like we can really do some good work in this time. Would you tell them that?
I understand from Makara that she is really excited to be here, and that she feels that we can do some good work in this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. How many mothers are in the room? Can I see your hands? Okay, well, you know, no matter how old your child is, you still get to tell him what to do, right? So I want to just talk a little bit about Matrix Works and myself and to introduce the facilitation team to you. I'm curious if you have found the materials that we put out for you on the table. Yeah? One is a copy of the slides, and the other is a little manual, a very hopefully informative document that talks about how I and we apply living systems principles to working with groups. Yeah? Everything that applies to science and technology applies to human systems. And so I've tried to give you some information that may supplement the kinds of things that we'll be doing together. So I believe Matrix Works is a kind of social technology, social innovation technology. And maybe the best way for you to understand these terms is to do a little exercise at your table. Does nobody's by themselves at a table, right? Okay, so at your table, would you please share with each other what has impacted you the most since you arrived this morning? Each person will have about a minute to speak, and please listen with attention to each person who's speaking. And begin now. What has impacted you? And it's helpful if you look at each other as you're speaking. You might even want to smile. Yeah. Yes, and you do it too. Okay. When I identify each of you, please stand up and just say something. You know, hi or love or something. Hi, love. Okay. Say something. Well, you know, it's just like you have a voice. Yes.
I was just curious how it was for, what made that impactful, and how are you now?
Oh, I feel good. It felt like there was a kind of loosening or opening in my chest.
I think that was the most impactful thing that happened to me this week, watching that and feeling the impact of that in the room. Because basically, that was it was deeply authentic. You guys made yourself vulnerable, and I think it set the
becoming conscious of how I am you, how I am affected by you. Okay.
What about you?
Still didn't have a chance to meet everyone, but it really, and being in a different space from where I'm coming from, it's really amazing. That kind of like, it's kind of like the way to the future. Also, you can see the beginning, the inception, the illumination. So it's kind of impacting me in a way, like to be part of it and experience this collective energy or collectively people coming together and being part of it. This is also love. Impacting me. I don't know.
Sort of a threshold.
Something about seeing everyone together
Yes,
after working with them from afar.
yes, yeah, exactly. It's different. Meeting in person is different. Especially when you connect in person, it's so much different than when you connect with the technology. I mean, thank God for technology, right? Because you can still communicate, but you can still see each other.
So different though.
But when you meet in person, it's just you also feel the energy of the other person. It's different. You connect on a different level. So that's
They keep calling us back. Greg, I thought your speech was very good.
It was really good. That was fun.
Yeah. Ditto.
It was also very human.
Was that okay in terms of time? Did everyone get to speak? Yeah, not quite. Okay, just take one more minute, all right? And then we'll come back together as a group.
and everyone is part of that. It's like something that's coming through and really, it's really beautiful. I noticed that I was a little bit like kind of in like ready position, I would say, for the beginning of the speech, and then I think when you started talking about the birth of your children, and I noticed this dropping into a really humanness and vulnerability, and I noticed a real big like exhale also.
Yeah, it came out of the head more into the heart.
Okay,
I loved when you said,
so
no one's in charge.
that was a little that was a little taste of using a social innovation technology, which is just the experience of having people speak to each other about what has affected them. And it doesn't really, it doesn't make that much difference how you frame the question. The experience of just being together, being and doing and relating are the key elements of what I'm calling the social innovation technology. Was it fun for you? Yeah? Yeah, yeah, and we'll have lots more of that. The, this slide is not in the packet that you received, but I think it's quite important to name, and that is that today is a special day. It's a new moon, and it's also a solar eclipse. So that means that the energies, Greg was talking about, above us and below us, the energies in the environment are very strong. And tomorrow is the beginning of the Tibetan and the Chinese New Year. And how many of you are aware of this or follow this? Some people, yeah. And so, at least in the Tibetan tradition, the next 30 days, starting tomorrow, everything you do is multiplied 100,000 times. So we will be doing this work of governance and, determining who you want to be and how you want to be in very auspicious circumstances. So I think it's, how did we get the dates, Greg? Who made that decision? Okay. So I'd like you to know who is a part of our team, and I'm going to ask my colleagues to stand up. And the first person is Sarah Oswald, who is a teacher of this work. And we've been together how long?
9 years.
9 years, long-term relationship. And would you want to say anything about yourself?
I just want to say hi.
Okay.
And it's an honor to be here with you at the inception of your community. It feels like a real privilege, and I'm excited to participate with you as well as contribute to your group.
Thank you. And Alex, who's also a long-term relationship. How long have we been together?
About 10 years.
10 years. Yeah. And what do you want the community to know from you?
I'm really excited to be here. I don't know that much yet what blockchain is.
Okay.
But the few people that I've asked in my life that do know about what it is say that it's completely going to change the world.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited to be with you and to learn from you.
All right. Thank you, Alex. And Heidi Piper, who, by the way, flew in from Germany last night to be here with you. It's pretty impressive.
I think I'm not alone. I heard somebody else talking about jet lag. So I wasn't the only one sleepless in Seattle last night. So I'm hugely passionate about innovation, and I've been an innovation leader for 30 years. And I'm amazed at what you guys are doing. I really do think you will change the world, and I'm super excited to be here and to get to learn more about it and to do anything I can to help.
And how long have we known each other?
I think 15 years.
All
maybe.
right.
Yeah.
Long-term relationships are essential. Okay. So our intentions are really, just as Greg said, and I didn't see his slides before, but how to have who you are be aligned with what you do at all possible levels, so that your relationships, the way you accomplish tasks, and the culture that you build are all really related to each other and to your values and to your purpose. I believe that living systems are the pattern of relationship that's going to survive in the 21st century and beyond. And we are at a bifurcation point. We really are. How many people here wonder if we're going to survive? Yeah, at least half of us. And feel somewhat helpless about what to do. Yeah. And I think this forum and this initiative is something that can help us direct energy in a positive way, and why it's meaningful to be here. I believe that our capacity to be human together can be supported by certain shifts in consciousness. And I would like to take you on a little journey in this direction if you're willing. So will you authorize me to guide you? Yes, let me see. Hands? Okay. So I need you to sit up in your chair. Have your feet on the floor. If you're comfortable allowing your eyes to close, please do that. If that doesn't feel comfortable for you, And just rest your eyes gently on the space in front of you. Invite the breath to come into your body. It's a very simple but effective practice called 3 breaths. Imagine you can breathe into the top of your head and release the breath down to your shoulders. Take a breath into your shoulders and then slowly and fully send the breath down to the hip joints where the legs join the body. Breathe into the hip joints and send the breath down all the way to the bottoms of the feet. And do it one more time on your own. Breathing in and exhaling. Inhaling and exhaling. Inhaling and exhaling. And in just a moment, I'm going to say a potentially nourishing phrase to you. You don't have to believe it or even think that it's true. It's much more like I'm dropping a pebble into the pond of your mind, and you get to watch the ripples, what happens all by itself. When you hear a voice that says, you are the author of your own experience. You are the author of your own experience.
You are the author of your own experience.
So I invite you to notice if your response to this phrase came in the form of sensation. Maybe you felt a warmth or a coolness in some part of your body. Or if perhaps you had a thought or saw an image. And some of you may actually have had a feeling arise or a memory. And whatever happens is okay. You're just paying attention to how you're organizing in your inner state. And take another minute with your inner experience. And slowly come back with your full attention to the room and to the work that we're doing. You might want to stretch a little bit after that pause. In the business world, I call this activity the power of 2 minutes. And it seems to make a difference in how people can bring their presence into the room. So, yeah, I want to see some stretching. Just, raise your arms, make some noise. Yeah. It's refreshing. So, the first part of this, what I call repeatable process, so you begin to access your collective intelligence, is we invite you to shift your state of consciousness by just a few moments of pause and inner reflection. The next thing we do is some partner work. So for this, I need you to stand up. Please stand. I'd like you to walk around. It's good to move. Find someone you don't know well. Share with your partner, share with your partner an obstacle you had to overcome to be here today. Something you had, maybe it was you had to get gas in your car, but something you had to do in order to actually be here today. And just, 30 seconds. Just a moment, I'll ask you to get another partner, but before you do that, please look at your partner and share with them something that was nourishing about this conversation to you. I thought you were funny, or, I really liked your enthusiasm, but something that's a little piece of feedback for them. So do that and then thank them and walk away. You're going to have one more partner. Again, find someone you don't know. Walk around. That you bring to RChain. Okay, stay with your partner. Gonna add some complexity. So each dyad will need to get together with another dyad so that you're a small group of 4. But if you are a dyad of 2 men, then the dyad that you join has to have at least 1 woman. If you are a dyad of 2 women, the dyad that you join must have at least 1 man. And you should also pay attention to the age of the dyads. So you should be relatively dispersed along the age line. So begin to mill around with your partner, arm in arm, please. Arm in arm. And find your partners, okay. So, does everybody have a belonging, a place of belonging? Yes? Okay. So, again, adding some complexity. Please share within your foursome what was your mystery message. And if you need to go get it, you can do that or get a new one. Each person shares their mystery message. Shh. There's one more level to the task. Shh. After you hear each person's mystery message, and perhaps even give a little response to, how it affects you, then as a foursome, you combine these individual messages into a new message that you will offer to the whole community. Clear? Okay. I'll give you a little more time for this one. If you're ready, more time? Okay. Did you tell them they're higher? Okay, we're just getting started. You understand what I'm doing?
So far, I think.
Good. So we're taking the disparate parts
And with them, I'm trying to put together
and helping them form into a new whole.
industry list.
And then we're going to do it one more time with your group and another group.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it's the principle of all this differentiation and then the pattern of integration. Only to differentiate and to integrate. And that's the, I think, the pattern of healthy organization. Yeah. We'll see. It's my assumption anyway.
I think you can trust your assumption.
Okay, thank you. I need that. Okay. Shh. Are you having fun? Okay, good. So, this process of taking disparate and differentiated parts, you each have a mystery message, and finding a way to integrate and move to the next level is, I think, the pattern that all healthy organizations can do. It's what the body does all the time. So we're going to take this one more level. So would your group of four, everybody has a message, and I have to have these because it's what I take into my next group. You're working for me now. So if you're a group of 4 or 5, doesn't matter, join another group of 4 or 5. Keep your eye on age and gender and anything else. Could be race, if anything. You're paying attention to everything. And you share your consolidated statement. They share theirs, and you consolidate one more time. Yeah. All right. Shh. So we'll take a break in just a minute, but we got to hear these, and I would ask if you will select one person from your group to write your statement on the flip chart. So decide who will do that. And we're going to go, how about this? I'll bargain with you. Let's pay attention and finish this, and we'll take a little break. Okay? All right. I want to know what yours is. Read it and then go write it.
Apologies if I pause here. My handwriting is terrible. Be brave enough to let others transform into your best self, for it is precisely when we speak our truth and act on our dreams that we can let joy be the gift that we bring to the world.
Who's next? This one.
Ours is a little bit shorter. Awaken life through love.
Okay. Who's next?
Don't be afraid to realize your potential to inspire compassion in the world because you are made of love and liquid light.
Whoa, yay.
Thank you.
Okay, up there. Next.
Awareness of yourself opens the doors to gratitude, compassion, and creativity, allowing you to reach your highest potential.
Whoa, Greg. Wow. I think I want a job here. Okay.
Inspired, creative expression of truth will set others free.
Ours is still a little bit fluid, I think. Something like allow yourself to follow your heart, whose true nature is compassion. Close. That was kind of, close.
Through maintaining our humanity, we can find joy in the winds of change to create our breathtaking dreams.
Hi. Let truth light the always changing way to your heart's joy. So let truth guide the always change. Let truth light the always changing way to your heart's joy.
I don't mind. Actually, it's fun for me.
Microphone, thank you. So please, sitting with your team, any table. It's ideal if there are 8 of you at the table, but that may not work, and that's okay. Okay. I'm curious if you feel a little bit more connected to the people here. May I see hands? Yeah? Good. Okay. Oops. So in my efforts to discover, to unconceal, reveal, what are the secrets to establishing hive mind, also called collective intelligence? I believe that these 3 processes, or these 3, I don't know what to call them, truths, need to be awakened in the people who are a part of the group. And the first is connection. And that's what we were doing here, helping you connect to yourself, to what you care about, to things that have meaning for you, and to each other. Could say helping you connect to something transpersonal, but not in a airy-fairy way. I don't think compassion or love are airy-fairy. They're real parts of what's available to us as human beings. So helping you connect to those things, in you, between you, and in the larger field. So I'm hoping you got a little taste of that. The second thing that I have found has to be available to us if we want to access hive mind is the ability to work with chaos. And by chaos, especially creative chaos, I'm referring to a kind of evolutionary impulse that may not be all neat and tidy. Yeah, it may be in fact, very messy and clumsy and awkward and difficult, but that it's a part of any living system. And we want to, at least in Matrix works, we try to uncouple chaos from trauma and actually put it together with, couple it with relationship. So at your table right now, will you talk about what kinds of chaos exist in RChain right now? Oh, wow. Boy, did the energy change, huh? Okay. So we're gonna time limit this. Please be nice to each other. Make a written list of what you think are the areas of chaos. Okay? Shh, just 1 second. If you get through in a positive way the spiral of connection and the spiral of chaos, I believe we come to a new level of consciousness that we're all so hungry for. So that's where we're going. But we gotta open the door to chaos. Please begin. And I will come visit you. to bring a chair and sit with me in the center. Let's do that much first. Heidi, will you go with me? Bring a chair. Very good. Nice to meet you. What's your name? Fish. I'm representing the team. No, she's Greg. No, she's co-facilitating with me.
If in the second it's muted, just be help there. Yeah. Now it's live.
Okay. What? Oh, here, you'll need a mic. I need more people in this inner circle. One from each table. I don't know. I didn't count. So, how do you need to sit across from me?
Okay.
Trade.
Do you want to trade with me?
Yeah, come sit here. People who are at the other tables, please come stand around us. Come.
Should we move into the center to fit us? Yep. Breathing down your neck.
Where is Sarah? Can you record, make notes of what's said? Yeah, we have the camera. Yeah, I'm bouncing on the ball. It's the only time I get to be on the ball. So, this is the last thing we'll do before lunch. And it's just the beginning of shining the light of awareness on what are potential evolutionary leaps that can be made in this community. And I had some very interesting conversations going around to different people and feel like I got so much information. And I'm imagining that a lot of information arose at your table. So I'm going to pass the mic to each person and ask you to say what arose in your table that you think is most important. Yeah? You don't have to tell us everything, but like the real juice. Yeah? And I may pause from time to time and see how what's being said is landing in the outer circle. But right now, we're only talking to ourselves, and we're the fish in the fishbowl, and they can't talk to us. But they will feed the fish. They will give us feedback after we've heard from all of us. Okay, will you start? Say your name.
My name is Kenny. Good to see you all. At our table, we were discussing some of the chaos that we feel or see or think about on a day-to-day basis in the community. And one of the things we kind of landed on was there are just so many ways in which we communicate these days, either through emails or Discord or GitHub or the YouTube channels, and it just can feel overwhelming and like there's no central point of like what's going on. But then we brought it back to that connection level where we know who to talk to, hopefully, when we have questions, like who can I talk to in whatever medium that happens to be. And then what came of that, as we've been discussing this collective being that we all are trying to create, taking time to be aware of what's going on. So an example from that would be what's happening right now if you relate that to a kind of a biological system, this might be like a brain or some other part of the body that is then communicating information out. And I want to also point out that the people here in this room, we have a very high bandwidth kind of connection and communication with each other, and that the eyes of the larger self, it's right there. That's what it is. And the information that is streaming through that is going to be going out to thousands and thousands of people and live for years and years. And just think about what that kind of means and be conscious about what it is that you're thinking and feeling, because the words and the things and the thoughts that we have here today are going to live on in a collective understanding. And I think that's really powerful and really interesting. And hopefully what's happening now is that we're creating the relationships and the love and the trust that will help us create a better world, a better future. Thanks.
I would invite you to look around. Just look at each person, just in this circle. And choose the person to go next based on what you imagine, how you imagine they were most affected by what you said.
Little decisions and big impact. My name is Adrienne. I just realized as he passed the mic to me, that's what I saw on my page, was little decisions have high impact. And that was a little decision right there. So at our table, it was quite interesting because it kept coming down to the chaos that we were experiencing and witnessing was around communication. And, you know, it's both the channels themselves, it's the people, it's the, you know, all of these different things that us humans experience and go through with communication, for better or worse, you know. And so one of the things was around noise, and that there's so much noise that actually people started talking about, well, okay, so if we have open channels of communication, then sometimes people start just saying everything, and they're not necessarily being kind or nice, you know, and that starts putting the people off who are there to do the work, you know, and who really care about the purpose. And so they start checking out, and they're like, well, I just don't look at everything anymore. And, you know, what occurred to me when I heard that statement was that that's like exactly the kind of challenge that we face, that if we start tuning out and checking out from these modes of communication, then this organism dies, right? Or it gets taken over by the cancerous, you know, the nodes or the communication that is not healthy. So that's obviously not the way to go, but that needs to have some really strong intention to move it out of there. And bystander effect was another thing that was identified as a major issue. So bystander effect is basically someone seeing something going on, everyone knows it needs to happen, and no one steps forward to do it, right? And that's a common thing in humans that we do. So how do you start addressing this? Our table, of course, you know, like many humans, we jumped to solutions and we started looking at it. I will name a few of the things that came up. One of them was around, what was it called? ICS, Incident Command System. And it was talking about groups of 5, and each one of those groups, they have specific roles, and then they have subgroups within those things. So that was something that was put forward that is very effective, and it can be with large groups or smaller groups. There's also holacracy, which is around, you know, basically how can an organism survive, and that the players in each of those circles are roles, right? So they're not, and they're playing a function. And I think that there's something magical about having the function at the center that helps it, maybe just a little bit of depersonalization in a way that might be helpful. You know, yeah, so It was a great conversation. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Greg. I'm the other Greg. I'm Greg H., for those of you that don't know. Great conversation at our table, and I think a lot of the resounding words that I'm hearing from everybody is communication. Huge believer in communication, and I think if there's anything I could improve, and I don't have all the answers, and nor did our table, on communication with this community and how we do that, and how we process that, and how we sort of push that through. We talked a lot about making sure that we were all on the same mission as well. And surprisingly, I think at our table, most of us probably had a different view of what that mission is. So I think that comes back to communication again. We've got to communicate better to be able to tell everybody what we believe our mission is, or we're never going to get there. And then there was some talk also about sort of the top-down decision making and how we don't want that, but some people do want that. You're used to that, but you're here because you don't want that. So what does it, so I mean, it's an interesting sort of web that we weave, and I'll just end it with one thing, and it is so timely from what I was reading on this morning, and I had forgotten it, and I read a lot on Steve Jobs and Apple, and one of my heroes from way back from watching him, and he always said about focus, and this is the one thing that I always say in an office as well, and some of you that have worked with me know it, you know, that's the one F word you should use around the office more than anything else, in my opinion, and it is, he always said it's not about focusing on one idea, it's being able to pass on 100 great ideas, and that to me, if you think about that really resonates with me, so that's what we talked about.
My name's Deanna, and communication was a huge topic at our table as well. So on one hand, we have so many different communication channels, it's impossible to figure out where you're going to get information. But on the other hand, we also have a huge lack of communication between holdings and between the activist groups, and so that was pretty much a big focus of what we were talking about. Another issue was in the onboarding process and actually how to find information about the projects, and so new members or new employees that are coming on, it's like how do I get the information that I need in order to be effective at moving this forward. Another big issue that we discussed was the issue of authority. So for each of the members and the people contributing to this project, how does that person gain the authority to be able to make decisions and be respected for those decisions? And then the last thing, we had a couple people at our table that have been new members of RChain. And one of the things that we were discussing is really the approachability of this project. From an outside perspective, it's really hard to figure out what all these different entities do, how they interact, where do you go for information on that, again, with the so many channels. And one of the analogies I was using is that, for me particularly, I see RChain as the Shangri-La of blockchains, right? So it's kind of hard to get to, how do you get there, but once you're there, you're like super excited, it's like, ah! So I think we can get there. Obviously, as a decentralized group, it's going to be a lot harder to get there, hence the Shangri-La part, but I think we can get there.
You can choose. I was just remembering that, as I understand it, we have about 375 trillion cells in our bodies, and every one of them knows what every other one of them is doing at all times. So it's something to aspire to.
So, whose turn is it? Who's the next victim?
Hi, I'm Dan Conley, and at our group we observed that there's a lot of people coming to RChain, which is great, and they come and they each get a different picture of the elephant and they run off and they tell everybody else, and then the next guy who comes in is like, I heard two different things from two different people, so that's a form of chaos. and another one is somebody has a great idea, they get a little bit of momentum going, and then what do? Which direction do they head? And then then there's, in particular, there's some stuff about there's possibilities along the sort of technical roadmap, and a little bit of tension there, and so that's a form of, chaos. And you mentioned centralized decision making is something you're kind of used to, and it's easy to fall back on that. On the other hand, we're here because we don't want to do that. So, and yes, that's what we talked about. Certainly.
Hi, I'm Mish. I'm really honored to be here. I'm really happy to be working with everybody. I know everybody has something special to say and something to contribute, which is wonderful. So we start off talking about the common purpose, how we're all trying to reach secure, stable, transparent concept that's fair to the world. And then we identified the concept of chaos, and what that entails. And so we started talking about how there are individual projects that are involved, experimentation, which is just a normal part of being human. We experiment, that's how we learn. Sometimes it takes us off track, but it gives us experience. And then we talked about the misalignment of strategy and the implementation of tactics. Some people are good at presenting strategy, other people are good at carrying it forward. And then someone at our table had mentioned something that really resonated with me. They talked about the concept of transparency versus privacy. They kind of bump heads in a way. How can you be private and secure, but at the same time be transparent? Then we tried to define what is governance, because everybody has a different definition. So we mentioned what Vlad was talking about in terms of its shared resources, and the shareholders utilize those resources, and then there's rules that govern the use of those resources. We mentioned a couple things about communication is a problem, power and chaos kind of feed off of each other. The concept of leadership versus management. I know with my experience, I was a firefighter, so we had a lot of those issues. Some people were in leadership roles, some people were in management roles. It just doesn't mesh. You just have to find what everybody fits. Then we talked about hierarchical goals, from working from the bottom up versus the top down. And then the concept of individualism versus collectivism. Everybody hears from a different place. Everybody has a story. Some people were raised in an individual way. We are in an individualistic society. Some people come from a collectivistic society. Family's a priority for them, or everybody has different goals. And then we started identifying, hope I'm not taking up too much time. We started talking about the concept of trust and building on a foundation. Sometimes there's lack of trust on the management team, which causes lack of focus. But it's the same thing with a ship. We're all on a ship. There's a captain, there's a co-captain. They have an intuition, and they're following that intuition, and they know where they want to go. And everybody else has to trust that we're all trying to go to the same place, and we're on a voyage, and there's going to be rough waters, but we're going to get to where we need to go. And then we ended on the balance of power and alignment. So we were saying maybe it's good to start to identify who the shareholders were, what their priorities were, and then we kind of did a little imagination. We worked our imagination a little bit to try and think of even the founders of the Constitution. How did they think? Where did they start? What was it about? And we said it was about the people. So that was very, very insightful. And then while I was sitting here, I was thinking of the concept of the leadership versus management. They say leaders do the right thing and managers do things right. So I drew a little, it's hard to see, I wish I had a bigger board, but I drew a little picture here, and you can see on the leadership side, you have the leaders at the front, and he's pulling everybody, and which is pulling the business, pulling the new technology, and then you have the management where he's telling everybody what to do, but he's kind of weighing it down a bit. Yeah. So there's sacrifice, and that goes with any new project, and you just have to kind of find a place in between that's comfortable. So, thank you.
right. A lot has already been said, but it all kind of resonates with what we've already talked about with chaos and communication. I'm going to pinpoint the 3 things that I think are the most chaotic in the last month. The ventures deal. If you were in the Discord, you saw it. There was just a lot of people arguing. And in my opinion, it was just circular conversations. People just wanted to talk and not listen. And yeah, I'm sorry. Is that how you do it? All right. It's my first time with a mic. Cut me some slack. But with the ventures deal, there was a lot of communication issues, and the first time the ventures deal was acknowledged, a lot of people talked about it and complained, and those people were vocal, and then a week went by, everyone kind of got quiet. And I think there has to be a stronger follow-up. If we're really concerned about these issues, you got to continue to follow up and say, hey, like, what's going on with the ventures deal? Not a month later say, wait, that already happened? Why wasn't I informed? We got to be more active and vocal and say, hey, we want this to happen with tranches. We don't want 100 million rocks to be thrown at these people. So in the end, I think we did it correctly, but we should have followed up. The members should have been more active and followed up on these channels and say, hey, what's happening? And so that's one part. Another chaotic thing recently was the logo, which we discussed at our table how there's some gridlock and time is money. And we had a designer spend a lot of time on a new logo. Ultimately, it just get turned down. So we have to do a better job of communicating the direction before someone spends a lot of time developing a new logo that ultimately might not be used. So that's a communication perspective on the overall long-term goal of RChain. And without that communication, we can't give solid answers to new onboarded members. I personally find myself saying, I think, and to my knowledge, this is what RChain is going to do. And he mentioned the elephant thing, how someone tells someone about RChain and everyone has a different answer. We have to find these concrete answers to onboard new members with so they know what's going on. And right now, it's a lot of, from my side, I say, I think this will happen. I think too much. And people want that concrete answer. And right now, with the communication issues, we don't have the concrete answer. So that's Jason. On Discord, I'm YSGJ. I talk a lot, I think.
Hi, I'm Kent, and so I just wanted to echo the communication issues. So maybe a bit into the specifics. We talked about how the weekly hangouts were, they're great, but they're not really great for picking up information in terms of like a summary of what has been going on, because some people can attend and other people don't want to like rewatch the whole thing if they didn't. And so that's one aspect. And another thing I wanted to point out was, the issues around centralization, whether we want it. And David actually brought up an interesting point, how we have a charismatic leader, right? And how, how that could play a role in terms of, how that affects the decision-making process. And yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that. I think we covered a lot of issues or other people covered a lot of issues that we talked about.
So my perspective is a little bit, I'm Kyle Butt. So my perspective is a little bit different. I don't see the communication issues as nearly as much.
my focus is heads down and technical, and I see the technical chaos. And I actually see that first, because if we don't solve that, nothing else is going to matter. So, like, the technical stuff, in a sense, has priority, because if it doesn't work, none of this matters. I'm trying to get, our team is trying to get everything to work, and what is the technical chaos? There's just, what we're doing is ambitious, and just a little bit, and we're seeing pieces come together, but nobody's done anything like this before, and so like doing something new like this always comes with risk, and so that's the chaos that I see is getting it to work and controlling risk and planning for things that we can achieve, and trying to as much as possible demonstrate minimum viable product, right? Produce something that works, that shows that we're making progress, and trying to structure our work so that we can keep doing that and showing that we're making progress towards the ultimate goal. So that's the chaos that I see every day.
I'm so glad that you spoke, because what I was distilling from some conversations that I took part in while you were at your tables was really illuminating for me. And it has to do with, I think, what is really core to the actual chaos that is underneath the surface chaos. And if I understood correctly, that there is perhaps a difference in worldviews or mindsets, or something big like that, between the developers and the people who are nose to the grindstone with the technology, and the people who are looking for an organization that would reflect this new technology. So it's almost like organizational health and a new way of doing companies, and a new way of having governance, a democracy that works. And then what is the relationship between the technology, the developers, and I'll just call it this new paradigm of organizations? Can they come together? Can these two approaches be made into a convergent whole, or are they whole in themselves and we don't try to make them come into alignment? Right? Where's my friend? Yes? Sort of? Okay. Yeah. So anyway, just to just to add that to the importance of you doing this kind of self-inquiry that helps you get to the bottom of what is the evolutionary chaos that is helping you become who you want to become. Yeah? Does that make sense? Yeah, I was very inspired. So it's almost at lunchtime, but we've got to have a few pieces of food from the outer circle. So if 2 or 3 people could say what we are, yeah. She will. She'll be first. Okay. What we will, how you're affected. So Heidi, would you contribute something? And then we'll hear from the outer circle.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating because I'm brand new to all of this, and I have 30 years of experience in innovation, and so many things that you're talking about are so common in the innovation process. Yes. And I think that having the framework that is shared there about connection, chaos, and consciousness, I think it's really fine and appropriate, and you're right where you need to be. I think right now with all of this chaos, it's very natural and perfect, I think, for the time, as a setup for the time that you're going to spend together, because now you've all raised what are the key points, I think, that you might want to pay attention to, and I think the solutions will start to emerge very readily because you're very open. I think it's really fantastic.
Good. Yay. So, anybody from the outside, just give us a piece of food.
Okay, so something in addition to what we talked about is the concept of trust.
Yeah.
And trust with relationship to work.
Yeah.
When we meet out here, it's easy to trust because you have, you meet and greet face to face. But out there, when you do work, the question is, what value do we assign to this work? And I hear of ROI and I hear of KPI. But in the real sense of it, sometimes some work cannot be done one-to-one mapping to KPI, but in the long run, it will generate value. So that concept of value is still a blur area. And that is, in my opinion, trust is what would allow us to place value on something that doesn't generate our ideal KPI that we've articulated. So that's something we should think about.
Thank you. Yay.
Just very briefly, they are watching. Someone messaged me a moment ago, so people are watching.
Whoa, okay. Yes. Yes, Greg? Greg?
One thing that really stood out for me was just the ability to articulate something in response to a question that Heidi had asked. Or I guess it emerged in the group, but it came to a point when Heidi asked it. And that is my wish and hope that we kind of come to a new relationship to authority, right? So where authority is recognized as opposed to, pushed down from the top. Right, so the community recognizes in this moment, this person has the goods, and we're going to support them to get done what needs to be done. And it may be, a day later, it's this other person over here that has the goods to get done what needs to be done, and now the community is going to support them. So it's a different approach to authority, and I think. Also, there was another piece that Peter. I hope you don't mind if I share this. There was a nice dialogue yesterday that to me reflected what I see as the kind of reconciliation between the dev community and the business community. Peter had a question about the ratio of tokens that are going to be in the Resonate application to the Rev tokens. And so Greg and Peter and I hopped on a call, and we just said, well, what do we want the token dynamics to be long term? Right? We basically just took it down to the math, in terms of our goals for the token dynamics. What are they going to be for Resonate? Just forget about the Rev. How do you want them? What does that feel like? And qualitatively, what does it feel like? And quantitatively, what does that feel like? And then let's look at the same thing for the token dynamics for RChain. And there was a rich conversation. Like, I think Resonate learned a lot about how they're in charge of their token dynamics. And they need to be for their community. And then we just put the two curves side by side. Again, these are just back of the envelope kinds of discussions, but it was more of an engineering discussion. Right? And then all of the potential for being fraught and distrust and all of that stuff just evaporated. And we were able to come to an accord very quickly. And I think that's one of the things that the engineering mindset brings to the community is exactly that approach. So.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, Vlad, you'll be the last one.
One thing that really struck me is like how we were unable to answer the most basic questions about how things are going to be governed and what our kind of shared future is. And I think that's like a source of like evidence of a lot of chaos. And I think like as a result, everyone's kind of free to bring their own ideas about what the best solutions are, and we have this opportunity to like bounce all the different things we have available and see what sticks. And I think that like, you know, the fact that no one knows means that we have a lot of space to have these conversations rather than to have to assume that someone previously decided and try to find out about previous decisions.
Wow.
So you know, I think there's a lot of chaos because there's a lot of uncertainty about how we're going to coordinate.
Yeah, beautiful, wonderful. So it's been a full morning. We need to break now for lunch, and I don't know what happens this afternoon, so we need to orient people. Who knows? Breakout sessions. Okay, Veronica, tell us where to go and what we're doing.
Thank you. Okay, so after lunch is going to be in the Vashon room, just down the hall that way. Afterwards, we're going to have our 3 breakout sessions, and Mukara's team was kind enough to help lead those discussions, but you all have a breakout sheet. So look at those. If you have time during lunch, try to look through it. Group you want to be with. Yes, sorry. Did you raise your hand at me?
Yes.
Oh,
we have
look at her.
options for you.
Yes.
Please, you tell.
So over lunch, if anyone would like to continue these conversations, the MatrixWorks facilitators are offering to host conversations and just be facilitators of them. So if you'd like to talk about parts and wholes, go sit with Mukara at lunch. If you'd like to talk about using chaos creatively, go see Alex. Alex, can you? She's right over here. If you'd like to talk about scaling, come sit with me. And if you'd like to talk about purpose, whether that's independent, individual purpose or collective purpose, go see Heidi, who's sitting here.
I have a feeling those are going to be full tables.
Just to speak to one point, at our table, there was a conversation about a North Star. I mean, the reason the chaos, yes, communications is a big issue, but the thing, I think the biggest distress for people is that, hey, here is the one thing we really need to accomplish under which all these other activity that we're doing is happening. So what is this one thing that is important? There was conversation to technical chaos. So the point is, can we, out of this next 2-3 days, at least come up with, this is the one thing that everything that we're going to do for the next 6 months or whatever should align to. And this way, once that becomes, it's a criterion that an individual can ask themselves and say, okay, I have something to contribute. How can I make this one thing or enlarge this one thing? Or should I wait for whatever I want to do until this one thing is accomplished so that then everything will be in play? So just, that's my request, is that if we can somehow come up with the one thing that we all can put our heart behind, that we truly believe in, that would, I would be very happy with that.
All right, with that, we'll break to lunch, and we'll talk more about rooms.